something that, you want to let them know you've been praying for them, a verse or something that God's been teaching you. Anything would be cool just to send down for them. But we thought some personal notes might be nice, just along with some of these supplies and stuff that we're sending to them. So for the next 2 weeks, if you want to just write out a note, just do it generally to the church, to Luz del Mundo, and we'll put that in with the shipment that we send. So next Sunday and the following Sunday, we'll be collecting those notes and sending them along. Make sense? Cool? All right, let's do some work. We are going to dig into to some prophecy here. I wanted to offer some thoughts and principles here regarding this issue of how we interpret apocalyptic literature, which is what we're in the book of Revelation. This is an apocalyptic work. So the nature of the kind of writing that it is unique in the Bible. So I know that it's been challenging, and I know we all kind of bring some baggage with us to the book of Revelation, namely that it's some mysterious, no one can know at all what the heck it's talking about kind of thing, which is not really true. I think there's a lot of fear out there regarding this book and our ability to know it. And so I wanted to offer two principles to help with this. And I think it will help, and it will hem us in appropriately to how we handle it. First is this. There's many ways to interpret the Bible, but there's sort of two general views of the Bible. One is that the majority of it is figurative and allegorical. It's good principles, right? It's almost like fables that have good stories, that have good lessons, and the interpretation is up to the reader, right? So that's kind of one prevailing view of the Bible, specifically with Revelation. It can't be known, so basically whatever you think you can pull from it, great. The other is essentially literal, that what was written was meant to be understood as what it said, and that we're held within the confines of what was said, not what we think it might potentially mean for me or for you or whatever. And I want to just clearly state that, not just from a position that where we stand, but I would encourage you that there's only one way to view the scriptures. And that is that you do not have the freedom to arbitrarily apply allegorical or figurative interpretations to the Bible. You're not given that liberty in the Bible. God never gives that. And it's meant, and the way that it's written as Revelation. Now, this is important. I don't mean the book of Revelation, but God calls the entirety of the scriptures revelation, or an uncovering. It's a showing forth of something. That he says the Bible is to be known as this. This is what it is. God uncovering something for you. Like you don't know it before, and he goes, let me write you something that you would know, right? So if the basic, essential way we interpret the Bible is allegorical, how in the world do we come to any understanding of what God was revealing? It becomes at that point pure conjecture on the part of the reader, what they think it might mean to them at any point in time, rather than viewing it as God has chosen to reveal something that what once wasn't known is now made known, and you can know it by reading what he actually said. What he said means something, right? And so we take this view, and I encourage you to hold yourself to this, that you must have, and this is what's important to note, you must have identifiable reasons in the passage to take a figurative or an allegorical interpretation. There has to be something in the text that would lead you to conclude that this is figurative of something else. Otherwise, you must take it literally. Let me give you an example. We just had this in Revelation. And you remember a few chapters back that John was writing to the churches, and one of them he urged them with regard to a heresy that was coming into them, and he said, the heresy that's affecting you, of the Nicolaitans, was in the same fashion of Balak. Like, remember he talked about Balak and Balaam? And he said, they are like that of Balak or Balaam. So when we read that, we understand he's not actually talking about Balak or Balaam. He's saying what those people are doing that are trying to confuse you, they're doing something similar to that which Balak did in the Old Testament, right? But the language was right in there in the same fashion as Balak. So you're like, okay, we're not, clueless to the English language. That's a picture of something else that we now go, what do you mean it's like Balak? We go back and read about Balak and we find out that, that's the pattern. There was a drawing away of Israel from the one true God, and that's what Balak did. And so now that's a picture he's using. Are you with me on that one? Really easy to understand. And then the next very church, there was a prophetess named Jezebel. You remember that one? And it's like the first inclination is to think, wait, there's a Jezebel in the Old Testament too, right? Maybe this is a picture of something, so I'm going to go back and look at Jezebel in the Old Testament. But in that particular situation, he gave no indication that it was a picture at all. He said there is an actual prophetess in the church, and her name is Jezebel. So the only way that we can take that is literally. There's nothing in the text that leads me to look that it's a picture of something else. It's a good example of this principle played out after what we just studied. So keep that in mind. Unless you can defend it, you have no business going, I think it means this, and you take it off somewhere else. You have to defend that based on the text. No one can do that. I can't do that to you. I think it just means this because of this and this. It seems this way to me. God doesn't ask me to tell you what it seems like to me. My job is to tell you what it said to the best of my ability of what God was trying to communicate. Now here's the key. In apocalyptic literature, there is figurative stuff. There are pictures and images. They are there. But the best way that we understand them is looking at the broader prophetic context. That's principle number 2. So anytime, particularly in Revelation, we're going to read things here, right? We're going to read things back here that are images, they're visions, they're pictures of something. When it's not clearly understood in the immediate context, we look at the broader prophetic context and see if there's more there that God will help us understand this with. Does that make sense? So we have to look at what he's already said to help us understand the new stuff that we're in. We say this very commonly, but remember the first rule of Bible interpretation. When you parachute in here anywhere, God expects you to bring with you everything to the left. Right? No matter where I land, everything to the left, he's expecting me to bring with me. He's already said everything to the left. He's already written all that, right? So it's expected that I bring that with me to where I'm jumping in. He actually expects me to bring everything to the right as well, truth be told. But bare minimum, everything he's set up unto that point, I'm expected to bring. So I can't just go, I think it means this. We have to be able to go, I think it means this because of this, and this, he said. And now that helps me understand this right here where I'm at right now. I know that might seem basic, but you've probably found even in your MCs when you start talking about these things, it's really quick, isn't it? It's like, wow, I wonder if it could mean this. And we start chasing rabbit trails all over the place. We're held to what was said, not what we think. We're held to what was said. And we're going to actually try to model that this morning. You ready? We're going to go to the left. And we're going to go back, and we're going to establish the broader prophetic context for understanding where we're going in Revelation. Without the prophetic context, Revelation becomes pretty challenging. Admittedly, pretty challenging. Now, with what we talk about this morning, Lord willing, if it's clear, it will really help you as we go through Revelation. So we're going to try to do this, all right? Anyone here particularly interested in prophecy? Because I know if I need to do some dances or anything in between to keep your attention. Does anyone actually enjoy prophecy? Please, someone. Oh, boy. Okay, so I'll try to make this exciting. Rod, thank you. Come on. Got a second. Got another one. Come on, give me two. How about three? Three. All right, good. We got 3 people interested in prophecy. The rest of you, I'm going to break dance halfway through. Let's start getting into this, all right? So here's this broader timeline that we're working off of. This is human history from God's perspective, past, present, future. Okay? That's the operating timeline that we're going off of here with relationship to this prophetic passage. Revelation has these two basic sections, the things that are and the things that must soon take place. The things that are were present tense for the hearers and the recipients of the letter, the 7 churches, right? It was present tense for them. They received it, and that's what he meant when the things that are right now, when the 7 churches received it, that's for you guys in the right now. Where we're at in Revelation is we're ready to dive into the things that must soon take place. Okay? We're right there. We're right there. But in order to prepare ourselves for that, let's establish the broader prophetic context of the Bible. And we do that by going back to Daniel in the lion's den. All right? Let's go back. Daniel, get your Bible out, start flipping to the left. Daniel chapter 7, or do you thumb in reverse? Or, I don't know, you go back to Daniel, okay? You know what I'm saying? Go back to Daniel. Chapter 7, we're gonna just do a tour de force through 3 chapters of the Bible. So buckle up. Get this, 2 prophecies we're talking about this morning. 2 essential prophecies, that's it. Some details in between. But we're gonna cover one, then we're gonna cover the second one. Here's the first one. Let's read it. All right. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in his bed. Whoa. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and the 4 great beasts came out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Cool. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. Behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. After this I look, and behold, another like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back, and the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And then I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little horn, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Okay, now, next paragraph, 9. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. Cool? We got that? Let's go to the second prophecy. No, I'm kidding. So we got to break this thing down in terms of what it's saying. Cade, can you get me a cup of water, please? Second time through. So, what are the pieces that we can identify within it? Okay, we always start with what are the pieces. That was a lot of reading, but there are pieces in it that help us determine what's being said. Okay, so if you looked at the pieces, you probably already, if I just asked you what some of them were, you would recall these things, some basic thing. There's 4 beasts, right? A lion-ish kind of a thing, a bear-like beast, a leopard, he had some wings and such, right? And then what was simply called this great beast. So these were 4 of the things. Thank you. And then we also, it shifted from there to talk about these 10 horns. And from the 10 horns came a little horn, right? Cool? I mean, am I making any of this up at this point? Would you all concur these things were there, said, right? It's all there. Simple, just observing what was in the passage. Not saying anything, right, at this point. But these are the pieces, and clearly we would all concur that the prophecy is organized around these pieces. It said some details in between, but we know it's about these 4 beasts, and then we know it has something to do with these horns. Got it? Cool? All right. So let's attack them one at a time. Let's attack the 4 beasts. Get it? Okay. Come on, guys. Seriously. So we're going to attack the 4 beasts. Let's do this. Now, when we don't know, the best thing we can keep doing is keep reading. When we're not sure, we keep reading, because inevitably God interprets for us. Oftentimes in his word, as we go, he progressively gives light to this. He does that in just a few verses after. He says this in verse 17. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who shall rise up out of the earth. Well, that was easy. I mean, we could have thought that those, if we wouldn't have read 17 and we just said, oh, give me some options. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, you're probably thinking in your own mind, yeah, I had some pretty wild stuff I was already thinking up what that could be. Right? And he says, well, let me hem you in and give you at least the classification of these beasts as you should understand them. That the image given to Daniel was a representation of actual kings and their corresponding kingdoms. Right? That's what he's saying. These are actual kings. They come up out of the earth. So you might have thought maybe it's some angelic thing. Wrong. Maybe it's like a demonic thing. Wrong. It's just kings and their corresponding kingdoms out of the earth. Well, that draws us in, right, into what would then constitute a kingdom and who those potential kingdoms might be, right? That should be our next question. If they're kings and then kingdoms, which kingdoms are we talking about here? Who could he be referring to? When we don't know, we continue to read. And in the very next chapter, in chapter 8, he goes on to give another vision, which coincidentally also has 4 beasts again. A little bit different, because he's giving some different details about them. But he layers on top of the first vision a second vision speaking of the same 4 kingdoms, right? That's what he's doing. But the nice part in the second one is, without reading that whole thing again about those other beasts, go ahead and read 8, and if you're not convinced, read it again. But in verse 20, he actually says what 2 of them are. He says, as for the ram that you saw with the 2 horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia. And as for the goat, it's Greece. Oh, that was easy, right? I mean, I was in the realm of this could be demons, angels. I don't know what in the world's going on. Is this America? You know, is this America right now? It's Russia? It's got to be Chinese. It's got to be the Chinese, right? This stuff's out there. Go watch YouTube. All kind of crazies out there. And he says right in here in Daniel 8:20, he goes, let me tell you who the 2 in the middle are. Media, Persia is the second one, and the third one there is Greece. And so when we start to combine this together with the first and look at some of those clues within, we find that there are sequential kingdoms that proceed after the other. Right? You go back and read 7 and 8 together, and you'll see these are kingdoms. They're not spanned over a large period of time. They're sequential. So with the information given and the clues within and understanding sequence, now we actually have actual verifiable human history that we can play with, right? The kingdoms of Media and Persia, the kingdoms of Greece. Anybody remember world history? How many slept through that one? That was the only one I didn't sleep through. I liked that one. These are real kingdoms in human history. And so then we find, based on sequence and human history and the biblical account, we find that these layered prophecies in Daniel point to these kingdoms. That the first one was not mentioned because Daniel was in it. The one that preceded Media Persia was indeed Babylon. And he himself was in it. He said he was in there under Belshazzar the king, Nebuchadnezzar. You remember all those stories? Those are real. That's a real earthly kingdom verified outside of the Bible. Babylon was real. That really took place, and it really preceded the kingdom of Media Persia, which then was followed by Greece, whose most prominent leader was? Anybody out there? Greece. I mean, Alexander the Great. Remember reading about him? This real human history. And then we know that following the Greek Empire, yes, there was a bit of a transition period, but there was only one kingdom, whole earth controlling kingdom that preceded Greek, which was Rome. Okay? So we're not making this stuff up. Now, here's what's interesting to note. Remember when this is written. Daniel is living approximately 600 years before John is writing Revelation. John. So Daniel's writing 600 years before the book of Revelation is written. You with me? He's living in the Babylonian period. He's actually in captivity in Babylon. The concept of a Media-Persia kingdom, how would he have any inclination that that was going to happen? He wouldn't. He's living before any of it happened. How would he have any clue that Greece would even become something prominent? They were a nothing at the point in time in which Daniel was writing. Literally, they were a nothing. They were not on the world scene. They had no prominence. So here's Daniel writing 600 years before going, this is what God's giving him the vision. God's giving him in the interpretation of the vision. He actually sends Gabriel, the dude who told Mary that she was going to have a baby. Gabriel was flying around too all the way 600 years before that. When Daniel's crying like a baby going, I don't know what any of these visions mean, God's like, Gabe, can you go down, help this dude out? And he literally gives him the interpretation of these things. And he's telling him, this is what's coming in the hundreds and hundreds of years after you, Daniel. And now here's where we are, Daniel 600 years before, these kingdoms following it. We are in the point of history way after it. We can actually verify all this. This is exactly what happened in human history. But Daniel wrote about it hundreds and hundreds of years before it was even an idea. And this is what we would say is again, remember, unless you want to take it figurative and I think it means this or that or the other, where you have no ground to stand, the text actually gives you a real solid place to stand. He names these kingdoms. He gives us these clues and tells us that Daniel is foretelling the progressive development of human kingdoms on earth leading up to the time of Jesus Christ. Is that pretty fair? Makes sense for the most part? This is what he's saying. And this in terms of back at our timeline, if you remember that big timeline, there was some pretty colors at the beginning. Now we're zooming into the pretty colors right now. Just that little part pre-cross on the timeline. And this is what these colors represent. The human kingdoms that were building up to the time of Jesus Christ. But Daniel, look where he's at the timeline. Way back there. This is significant. On the cool factor for me, I think it's very cool. I think it's actually a very powerful testimony to the veracity of the Bible. That God foretells these things way before they happen, and in exactly the political progression in which took place in human history. This, by the way, is stuff most people who out there who challenge the scriptures have no idea that God's prophecy speaks to these things. None at all. They don't know that Daniel was giving these kind of prophecies that are foretelling these kind of events that are verified internally and externally. And this is the case. So this is really neat, but I'm not doing this morning for really neat. As neat as it might be for Rod, who was it? Mark, was it you? You like prophecy too? Were you the other? Okay, so you three. I'm not doing it for a neat factor for you three. What we need to know is get that second piece. Remember the four beasts was the first part of this vision? And the second one had to do with these 10 horns and the little horn, right? It's all part of the same prophecy. So he's talking about building up of these 4 whole earth conquering kingdoms, but it's a build up to this 10 horns and the little horn. What in the world? If we don't know, we keep reading. Look what it says. And about the 10 horns which were on the head. Yay, that's what we wanted. Okay, now watch what he says. And the other horn that came up and before which the 3 of them fell. That horn had eyes and a mouth and spoke great things that seemed greater than its companions. Stop. See what he's saying? Okay, I'm going to talk to you about the 10 horns and I'm going to talk to you about the one horn. That one horn, remember I said it had eyes and a mouth and it said great things? It's greater than the other 10. It's called a little horn, but it's actually greater than the 10. All right? Are you with me? It's just some pretty simple stuff. The little one's greater than the other, and it's someone that speaks marvelous things. And as I looked, 21, this horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given for the saints of the Most High. And time came when the saints possessed the kingdom. Whoa, whoa. Is anyone like going, this is sounding like Revelation stuff, but this is 600 years before. Verse 23, thus he said, as for the fourth beast, there shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be different from all the kingdoms, and it shall devour the whole earth and trample it down and break it to pieces. Look at 24. As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise. Now you're probably going, why didn't he just say there was 10 beasts? Because we already got beasts and kingdoms before. He calls them horns. Take it up with God when you see him. I don't know why he chose to flip the illustration and use horns, but he gives the interpretation here of what it is. So out of that fourth, one kingdom, Rome, there is going to come a 10, they're all together, but there are 10 of them, and within them, the little horn is a leader, a prominent leader will come from within that 10, will be greater than all the 10, but he will be associated with the 10, and he will have a very clear mission. What does it say? 21, the horn made war with the saints and prevailed over them until the Ancient of Days came. Is that, you get that? The horn, the leader of the 10 nation group, is going to have a singular purpose, warring and destroying who? The saints. And he will prevail over them. It will not be good until who? The Ancient of Days comes. Here's Daniel 600 years before John's writing any of these details out. And he's giving the essential timeline of the end times in great detail, but very simply. Very simply. This is how we're just going to illustrate it so you can have a reference point. So what he's describing then in the same vision, the vision lays out the 4, but then the vision casts forward to say that out of Rome, a 10-nation federation will arise at a point in time. He doesn't say when, right? He just gives details about the circumstances surrounding it, but he doesn't say when. But out of that, a 10-nation federation will arise, and there will be a singular leader to that, whose sole purpose will be the destruction of the people of God. His sole purpose will be the destruction of the people of God. And he will prevail over them. He will murder almost all of them. That's what it says, until the Ancient of Days comes and he deals judgment for this. Keep all these pieces in your mind. You're going to see this come to life in Revelation as we go through it. That's exactly what Revelation is going to talk about, is how that takes place, the lead up to the Ancient of Days coming. Now, let me try to help this a little bit. This 10-nation federation, the Antichrist who will come and who will lead them in this war against God's people. All right? It's pretty clear within the text that this is what he's speaking of. I think you'd have to somehow do some cartwheels to prove that it's not. That he's speaking of about a 10-nation federation that'll come out of Rome. The question becomes this idea of it coming out of Rome, coming out of the fourth beast as this new thing. In what way? In what way? Historically, in human history, we find that did not actually happen directly after the time of Rome. No 10-nation federation came outside of that. Right after Rome was destroyed in terms of split up. So we see this as a future thing to come, but he's talking about some of the ways that this new 10-nation federation that will come with the Antichrist as its leader will be in the pattern and fashion of what Rome was. So let me give you some ways in which it comes out of Rome. Why would it say it that way? 1, the 10-nation federation to come will have a similar scope to Rome. Rome in its day was viewed as an empire over the whole earth. Was it over the whole earth? Not really, but in relationship to this book and the perception of those who were the ones living out the reality of which this book speaks to, namely the Middle East, Europe, Western Asia, down into Egypt and all that. The primary ones who received this, to them, there was nothing else but Rome, right? We find out later the Chinese had some incredible dynasties and stuff going on over there simultaneously, right? But to the audience with zero awareness of all that, Rome conquered the world. Conquered the world. We can say this, the scope of the 10-nation federation to come, it will conquer the world. 10 nations, let me just give you a few, and you tell me how all-consuming over the world it would be if the United States, Russia, China, and India were all together as just 4. Would that cover most of the globe? How about its influence? Holy smokes. Just in population and landmass alone. I mean, that's only 4. Think about it. So a future 10-nation federation that would include just those 4 and add a few more. Put Great Britain in there, put Canada in there, add some, Brazil in there if you want. I guess, whatever. Just add them in there. They got good meat, You start doing the math and it's like, wow, this is now when we put this in terms of when it's going to take place, which is in the future on this earth of what in the world that we know, wow, 10 nations like that coming together, where there's no reason for us to think that that wouldn't be the case. This is going to have a scope similar to Rome, isn't it? In fact, greater. Scope. How about domination? Domination. Rome was known for its domination. They were known for that, trampling them out. That seems to be the pattern of what this 10-nation federation will do. You're either in or you're out. And if you're out, it's not good for you. That seems to be what's going to happen. Think about our military power that we have now. Think about those nations that I just mentioned. To combine the military power of just those 4, who could stand against? Think about it. Violence, we're going to see as we look forward to Revelation, that is exactly going to be the nature of this 10-nation federation and how they will implement what they do. It'll be through violence. But here's an interesting one. How they develop, I think also will be in the pattern of Rome. So let me just give you a real, brief history lesson about Rome and the uniqueness of the Roman Empire in human history. One thing set Rome apart from most of the other nations and the empires of its day. All the ones preceding it largely were built on domination and military power. You just kill more of the other people and take everything over. I mean, I know that sounds simplistic, but largely that was what defined those preceding empires leading up to Rome. Rome was different. Rome instituted things that we still are living on the principles of today. Think about the Republic of Rome. That was a radical idea that people could vote in those who would represent them in some form of the government. That's Roman. Think about the infrastructure things that they put in place, that even though you were conquered and dominated, there were certain rights that you had under law for equal representation, that you had to defend yourself. You could not be thrown in jail without a fair trial if you were a Roman citizen. These were radical ideas. That was not like that in Babylon. What the king says happens. You cross him, you die. That's just how it was, right? So Rome instituted some really unique things, and they were at the level of the culture and the worldview. Rome was desirous not just to acquire land, but to win people over to the Roman way. This is the better way. We're better than the others. And we do that by offering some things to you. For example, like, you remember the temple in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus? They were under Roman rule at that time. And that was a temple to Jehovah God. You ever wonder why that was allowed to be there? Why would the Romans allow that? Moreover, why would they essentially fund the building of it? because that was a Roman value. If you would pay taxes to Caesar and you weren't just a pain in the butt, you can worship who you want to worship. Later on, they started adding, you had to also worship Caesar. He's a god. But earlier on, it was very much, you can worship who you want. You can run your markets essentially the way you want. You can kind of have life as you knew it. But you'll know who's in charge. There are certain laws that are over all of that. You got to honor that in taxes and in coming under the legal system. So Rome was appealing to something at a culture level. They wanted to reshape the culture, not just acquire the land. Do you see the difference? It's a big difference. So there was philosophy and ideology behind it. Very unique. I think that's what's going to be happening in the 10-Nation Federation as well. And if you're a student of recent history, you will find that the world is actually heading in this direction right now. It wasn't that long ago that even in the Dark Ages, Europe was known as the bastion and the pillar of conservative evangelical doctrine. The Reformation had come and they had broken away from the Catholic Church. And here in Europe, not that much longer after Martin Luther and Zwingli and all of these guys started this spiritual revolution, Europe was very much unified around the centrality of the scriptures, justification by faith alone. Governments were even largely formed around the belief in this book. And do you know that right now, Europe's the polar opposite now. Ideologies have come in and shifted Europe to where right now one of the largest mission fields is the country of Italy. There's less than 1% evangelical Christians in Italy. Imagine that. How does that happen? It does not happen overnight. It happens by philosophical shifts at the worldview level. And Europe has begun to become unified together around a number of things. And it's not just the euro. It's an ideological way of viewing life, and they're creating I would say, a false unity around things that aren't centered on this. And Europe has largely gone that way. And if you're awake and aware right now in the United States, you'll find that we're in the middle of the exact same shift right now. It's what's happening here. Even when I was a kid in the early 80s, the assumptions about just being a good God-fearing person, right? I mean, that was kind of the deal. Some of us can speak to that. We remember those years of like, oh, you go to church, that's a good thing to do. You know, you gotta honor the big guy upstairs, man. You know, I mean, we all believe in God. Come on, this is America, right? Whoa, boy, that's changed in a relatively short amount of time. I'm not doing this as like scare you all to death. We should all like run and hide in the hills. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm telling you is this: wake up and see that the same pattern shifts that happened in Europe about 200 years ago, 100 years ago, we are following the same pattern. And the world actually as a whole is starting to move very much in a very same pattern of thinking that is secular and apart from what this book says. It's happening. Why do I say that? Daniel said it 600 years before John even wrote. This is what's going to happen. The same way that Rome took over at both a dominating militarily political way, but in an ideological, philosophical way, it's going to happen again. And guys, it's happening now. It's happening now. I'm not telling you it's going to happen now, that this is next week, all this takes place. I'm just telling you, if we look at human history, we can't deny this. This is what's going on. Be prepared, because this is Daniel saying this was going to happen. This was going to happen. Very important to note this. All right? So keep this in mind. That was prophecy number 1. Let's do number 2 quick. All right? Number 2 is this one. 2 verses. Daniel chapter 9. This is what Daniel says. Later on, this is a different time period later on with Daniel. He gets another vision. This guy must have been terrified to go to bed at night. But anyway, he seriously like, please, God, can I just sleep tonight? Okay, 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. Okay, stop there, full stop. Listen to what he just said. 70 weeks are decreed. There is a prophecy about 70 weeks, And at the end of the 70 weeks, we have full restoration to what God intended it to be. Look at the pieces. Finishing the transgression, put an end to sin, to atone for iniquity. Have those things already happened? Yes, they have. It's called the cross. But it's not just the cross. Look at bring in everlasting righteousness. That didn't happen at the cross yet. I don't think we're living in everlasting righteousness yet, are we? Nope. To seal both vision and prophet, seal it up. He's done. And to anoint a most holy place. These are future, everlasting, eternal realities of the eternal kingdom. And Daniel's talking about it 600 years before John even writes Revelation. Something about 70 weeks is a marker for all of that happening. Okay, keep reading. 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem, to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. Okay. So let's do the pieces. What were the pieces? Start simple. 70 weeks prophecy. It means 70 weeks. At the end of the 70 weeks, finishing, the atoning, the eternal righteousness, the sealing up of the vision, and the anointing of the most holy place. Like, it's all back together again, as God intended, right? 70 weeks, got it? But, other details were 7 plus 62 weeks. Anyone can at least do that math? Can I get, Sydney, how much is it? 7 plus 62. Go. You are using the calculator on your iPhone. Sydney Harris, 7 plus 62. Go. Yes, good for you. Bring him a free. We have nothing to give you. We're not allowed to give out food. No, we have some prepackaged. It's probably not good. You can get whatever you want afterwards in there, somewhere. Good job. 69. 69 weeks, okay? So, 70 finishes it. 69, there's something different. In order to know, we got to know the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. And at the end of that 69 weeks, the anointed one comes and the anointed one is cut off. Are you all in agreement that I'm not making anything up there? That's what it said, right? So there's basically 69 weeks marking the anointed one coming and dying. The beginning of this all is the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. And then there's a last 7 to finish it all. Are you with me? Let's do some math, okay? I won't call on you again, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to zoom in. This is the big timeline. Big timeline. The 70 weeks encompasses all of it. The 70 weeks is to get to the eternal kingdom. You with me? That's what it's going to. So Daniel, 600 years before Revelation gave us any of this, he's like, I'm telling you, there's this prophecy, 70 weeks is going to get us to the eternal kingdom. It's a wowzers, all right? But there's a 69 weeks that leads us somewhere here. Okay, let's look at it. We start with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. We start with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. If anyone can tell me who gave out this decree, you can also get the prepackaged food product of your choice. Does anyone know who was there ever an actual decree at the time of Daniel to go rebuild Jerusalem? And if you get it right, I'm going to give you a gift card to like any toy store out there. No? Okay. Well, Nehemiah chapter 2, 1 through 8, accounts for when this decree was given. Now, we do know this historically, about 4 to 5 decrees were given at the time of Daniel regarding Jerusalem. They had to do with a number of things. Rebuilding the temple, for example. There was 2 of them that were related to that, and a number of other things. Only 1 was given for the purpose of going back and rebuilding Jerusalem. Is your finger still back there in Daniel 9:24? Keep it there. Because isn't that what the decree was? To rebuild Jerusalem? Not the temple, just go back and rebuild Jerusalem. Israel's in captivity. They're waiting for it. Well, it did happen. Artaxerxes gave this decree. We know when. Ha! March 5th, 444 BC. Verified internally and externally of the Bible. Artaxerxes' royal decree releasing certain characters in the Old Testament. Anyone remember who these guys were that went back to rebuild Jerusalem? There's some books in the Bible that they wrote. Ezra, Nehemiah. Remember when they went back? They were doing it on account of the decree that Artaxerxes wrote that took Israel out of captivity and sent them back. And it was Ezra and Nehemiah that were some of the ones that went to go and be a part of the rebuilding of Jerusalem. We know it was March 5th, 444 BC. Holy smokes, how can we know that? History, baby. It's awesome. They wrote this stuff down. So we know that. Now we have a starting point. And he said it's 69 weeks until the anointed one comes, right? Isn't that what he said? 69 weeks? He got it right. 69 weeks, right? Am I right? Okay, good. 69 weeks. Now we have to count now. We got to count. I want to challenge you with something. When you hear the word weeks, what do you think? How long it's going to be till you have to listen to me again? Is that basically what you're thinking? Right? You think of a week in 7 days, right? Isn't that what you think? Well, interestingly enough, in the ancient world, namely the Hebrew world, week could refer to days, months, or years. It just meant 7 of them. 7 of time periods. Are you with me? We don't do that ever. We don't count that way. Thank the Lord. I don't even remember days, but it's all wide open in there. And so what we have to do is find contextually what was being talked about. Thank God for context. Because in Daniel 9, where this vision takes place, in verse 2 alone, look what Daniel says. I'm sitting there, and I, Daniel, perceived in the books, Daniel, I'm there studying, trying to figure out the number of, what? Years that must pass before the end of the desolations of Jerusalem. So Daniel is already in what mode? Years. I'm studying the number of years. And so when the vision comes to me with regard to the weeks of some time period until all this takes place, it's the only thing that we can conclude is that the weeks are referring to years. They're weeks of years. Are you with me? Because he said that. I didn't say that. Daniel said it. He's talking years. The vision comes and it says, let's organize your years, Daniel, that you're thinking of in chunks of 7. All right? You with me? So now we get to do math. Who loved math in high school? Sandy? Thank you for that. It's very good. Sandy and Mark. Wow. I hated math. So let's do some math. All right, here we go. Let's do it and see if we can get there. So we know when the decree was. If we do the math and we just turn this into years, 7 times 7 equals, where'd that come from? Oh, you did. Good girl, you still get some free food. So we do the math and we come up with 483 years. Go ahead, get your iPhone out. Sydney, you can check this out for me. Am I lying or no? You can verify to everyone. Okay, 483 years. You with me? Pretty simple. And yet it's not quite simple yet. Because if we do that, look where it takes us. It takes us to 38 AD. What happened? Can anyone tell me what happened in 38 AD? I don't have a clue either. I have no idea what happened in 38 AD. None. Jesus already went back to heaven. The temple wasn't destroyed yet. It was just not really good in Israel. It's basically all I can tell you. Not real good. Could this be it? Well, here's why I'm going to tell you it's not it. Not because that math doesn't add up, but it's because we're putting a Jewish lunar calendar years on top of our timeline. And we don't count our timeline according to the Jewish calendar. We use the Gregorian calendar. Their calendar uses 360 days. Our calendar uses 365-ish days, right? It's not actually 365. You know, leap year, that whole thing, where some people get ripped off every 4 years from a birthday. What a cruddy system. Why didn't we follow theirs? But we didn't. So the timeline that we think of and how we record human history is all built on the Gregorian calendar. So don't fear. All we have to do is take that time period that was talked about to them in their way of programming time and recording time. We just have to convert that to our time and see if something happens here. Guess how we do it? We do it by taking the number of years they had into the number of days that it was referring to according to their years. Okay? And so we come up with 173,880 lunar days in those 483 years. Are you with me? We just made it days. We took years. I'll try to go basic. Here's a year. We made it days like this. All right, so we took years and just made it a lot of days. So now let's take those days and make them our years. It's actually not hard. We just divide it by our-ish years. 365.24. Got it? That's how you take their years and you make them our years. You get the same days, but then you chunk them into our years, and you get 476 years. When you plop that baby on a timeline and you properly account for year 0, because it's not really a year, you got to add that right there. You get all messed up because there's a 0 in the middle of 1 and 1. You with me? You account for the 0, you put our calendar on top of it, and look where it ends up. Spring of 33 AD. Now that's an interesting time, isn't it? Any reason why that's interesting? The spring of 33 AD was exactly when Jesus entered Jerusalem at the triumphal entry. Exactly. And being that it was March, I mean, you could say at best it's about 20 days off. 600 years before it ever happened. 600 years. And all you got to do is a little math. And it tells you. And remember, the anointed one is revealed and then he's cut off. Do you see? Now listen, side note, put it in your cap. This is why the triumphal entry was so important. This is why Palm Sunday matters. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, and Mashiach has come. The Messiah is here. It's the first time he is officially revealed as Messiah, the anointed one. Although it might have been a small crowd, that small crowd was fulfilling the 600-year-old prophecy of Daniel, saying that the anointed one would be revealed, and but a few days later would be cut off, exactly like Daniel said. Now this becomes a holy smokes moment, right? Whoa. Whoa. All your skeptical friends out there who think the Bible's a joke and, it's just full of theory, do a little math with them. Most have no idea that this is what's been talked about in the Bible, let alone that 600 plus years beforehand, Daniel said this was going to happen by vision of God himself. Wow. Pretty impressive. That's the 69 weeks, right? But remember, there was going to be the one week. What about the 1 week? What's that about? Well, we have this. If we keep reading, the people of this, another prince comes on the scene. The prince, the Messiah anointed one, he's going to die and be cut off. But another prince comes. An influential leader comes. Wow, do you see how these things are starting to piece together? Another one comes who will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. This sounds like that other prophecy he'd already talked about. Desolations are decreed. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. Oh, there it is. Where was that number 70? Where was that last week? This other prince will come and he will make a covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he'll put an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. Think about what he's describing here. He's describing exactly what's going to transpire in that last 7-year period of time. A strong covenant will be signed. That will actually introduce worship again on the Temple Mount. But it says here, for half of it, the latter half, He's going to rescind this covenant. This treaty will be pulled out from under them. And no longer will the worship of the one true God be allowed. At the midpoint of this 7-year period, then an abomination takes place. Revelation will teach us that this one, the Antichrist, will remove the worship of the one true God and put a statue and an idol of himself up in it. And say, in the temple of the Most High God, the worship of me will be the thing that takes place. And that's the abomination. And look at the end of that. Desolation is going to come upon the one who does that, this Antichrist. That's all going to happen in that last week. If we're doing math, though, does anybody have a problem with the 69 weeks being right up to Jesus? And why didn't that last week happen right afterwards? Right? Or maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe I'm wrong and the last 7 years happened, right? Seems weird. What's going on right now? That all happened how many years ago? Maybe our whole theology is wrong. I'm going to present to you that it's not. We could spend a lot more time talking about it, but I want to refer you to Ephesians chapter 3, verses 4 through 6. One of the key passages that refer to this. Look at Paul's language. When you read this, Paul says, you can perceive my insight into the mystery of Christ, which was not made known to the sons of men in other generations. Namely, this mystery is that the Gentiles are fellow heirs, members of the same body, partakers of the promise in Christ. This thing called the church was a mystery up until the point when God revealed it to the Apostle Paul. Let me give you reference for this, okay? Paul is happening right here at the time. He's actually post-Christ in the church. Paul, he gets the vision at the beginning of the church that the church is the real deal, but no one ever knew that it was coming. See what he says? It was not made known to the sons of men in other generations. Do you know who those sons of men in other generations are? Daniel over there in the lion's den. He knew nothing about this time period in between the 69 weeks and the 70th week. There was nothing in the Old Testament to foretell of this. Paul says it right here. Those old dudes, Ezekiel, Daniel, Jeremiah, they did not know. It was a mystery. That mystery was given to me. I'm a steward of that mystery to help you guys understand that the game changed. All those guys, Ezekiel, Daniel, Jeremiah, guess who they all were? Jews. All of them in the nation of Israel, functioning in that time period as the people of Israel, right? That's what they were. They had no idea that God was going to open the door to the Gentiles to come in and be a part of his family. Paul says that was a mystery that I was given to help explain this to you, so that you would understand that before that 70th week is fulfilled, God has given a time period to the Gentiles to come in. It's pretty simple, actually, to kind of put it in there, but it's a pretty important deal. It tells us that the 70th week hasn't come yet, and that we're waiting for, namely, here's the event, here's the 2 events we're waiting for. Put it on your timeline. Bill talked about the rapture of the church being called up. That's an important thing that happens next. But the most important thing that triggers the 70th week is that strong contract, covenant, the treaty that the Antichrist will make with Israel and all the nations. And he will restore what looks like peace. And he'll restore temple worship on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. But it will all be a ploy to bring about the destruction of believers. That's the events that are forthcoming that will begin the 70th week. We do not know when that exactly will happen. But if we're paying attention to this prophecies now and looking at what Revelation is teaching us, things are aligning. We're certainly getting closer. Certainly getting closer. Do I know when that is? Absolutely not. But things are certainly leading towards this. They're leading towards this. Here's the whole thing together. This is what we have working up to. And what we're going to be studying in Revelation is almost the majority of it is that 70th week. It's just that last 7-year period. And just the last few chapters of it go into the millennium and the eternal kingdom that we'll talk about at the tail end. But it's this significant, this 70th week prophecy of Daniel is so significant that the last book of the Bible just talks about the last seven years of it to help us understand how this is all going to take place. Whew. I feel like I'm in a wind tunnel, all right? So keep these, write these down. This is what we're looking for. These are the future fulfillments of Daniel's prophecy that are yet to come. He spoke of them, but these are the ones we're looking for, and these are the ones that prepare us for understanding Revelation. The 70th week, that 7-year period, that has not happened yet. Believe me, you would know if that had happened. There would be the covenant. There would be the treaty. There would be worship of the one true God on the Temple Mount. That has not happened in any of our lifetimes. You would know these things. You would know the little horn. It'd be very clear. You would see the development of a 10-nation federation. These things are not happening right now in that kind of detail. But that's forthcoming, and Revelation will speak to it. The 10-horn, the 10-nation federation. We'll see this mentioned in Revelation. So we won't be shocked when we see another vision similar to this. We're going to layer it right on top of what Daniel said. And lastly, the little horn, the Antichrist, is other than Christ himself and how he's orchestrating these events. This is the most significant character, the antagonist, if you will, of the book of Revelation. And we'll watch his development in Revelation, knowing that it had been prophesied in the Old. Wow. Seriously. Get ready and read Revelation chapter 6 for next week. That will help. We're jumping into the 70th week next week. We begin to look at the 70 weeks first, initially in Revelation chapter 6 from God's perspective, heaven looking down, and how that will begin. Okay? So that's where we're going with it. Bring this with you. Now, in order to do this, I got a minute or two. Does anybody have a question or a thought or something with regard to any of this that is still like mud or cloudy? Anybody have anything at all? Nothing? Cool. All right. Feel free to come up and talk if you want about some of it. My prayer is that it will be helpful and clear to understand what was said in the past. That is the prophetic sort of foundation of where we're going in Revelation. It'll make a big difference when we get there starting next week. Okay? All right. Let me pray. God, thank you for this passage, this whole section. I actually, I think about Daniel. It's so cool, God, how you used this guy. Someone like us. To reveal something for the rest of us for all time after him, to be able to understand the things to come. It's just cool how you worked in his life. I just think there, even at the end of chapter 7, where he kind of writes his own thoughts and just said, man, my thoughts greatly alarmed me. My color changed, but I kept the matter in my heart. What a testimony of a guy to see things that he didn't understand, to really want to know, but at that point not being able to get all of it. But man, that you use this guy to write down what would be so crucial and beneficial for us moving forward. What a faithful guy. And just a testimony of your faithfulness to use people like him for such big things. I pray that we would take it with that level of seriousness, that as we engage with these things too, it's for the purpose of you doing big things through little people like us. That we would be just changed by it and motivated to reorder our lives according to this reality that's coming, not this temporary thing, which is not the end game. So I just pray you would help us to put eternity into perspective in our present context that we're in. So yeah, God, just keep teaching us as we move through this. In Jesus' name, amen.